Let's make a sports poster inspired by some album artwork. So I've been thinking a lot lately about using album covers as sports graphic inspiration. I feel like there's a lot of good stuff you can grab in terms of colors, layouts, compositions, and it's also just this endless existing library of graphics that you can look at. In this video, we'll be looking at the art for the album 1,000 Suns by Linkin Park. This was released in 2010, and it features this pretty cool abstract sort of gradient blur shape, and it's very simple, white background, black shape. So what we're going to use today is the Oakland Spiders logo that features some sort of techie looking circles and lines. I want this whole shape to be one color before we do anything to it. So to do that, let me just rasterize the layer first by right clicking, going to rasterize layer. And then I'm just gonna hit G for my paint bucket tool. And if we eyedropper this specific black or dark gray, we can fill it basically in all of these white spaces just by clicking. And you'll see it didn't fill it completely. We've still got these like thin white lines. We're gonna click again, and you'll see that made like the edges super jaggedy, but we're not really gonna care about it because we're gonna blur this whole thing. And now let's also paint in the remaining white parts just by going over with our brush. So we've got this black spider shape, and to make it look more like this abstract shape from the album cover, let's go ahead and convert this for smart filters, going up to filter, convert for smart filters, then we'll go up to filter, blur. We're gonna do a radial blur for this. And I'm gonna crank this up all the way to 100. We'll have it on zoom, and quality is good, that's fine. Hit OK. So already we're getting this gradient blur effect. Now one thing I like about the original album cover is it's got this natural asymmetry to it. So one thing you can do with the radial blur, basically if you have your object centered in the middle of the design and you activate this radial blur, it's gonna perfectly like jut out from the middle. But if we turn the radial blur off and then move the spider down or like to a different part of the frame, now when we turn back on the radial blur, it will actually like make it more of an uneven blur where everything is still coming from the center, but like you can see it's blurring out the top part more than this right side. You can also move it up here and again turn it off and on to see kind of a more extreme effect. But this is basically giving us a little bit of asymmetry, and maybe we can make it smaller, a little bit smaller too. So again, we'll put it in the top left corner, activate the blur, and that feels pretty good. So we've got this abstract shape, and we can also grab the exact color of this album cover. If you go to your brush, hold Option to bring up the eyedropper, and then click, and then with that color, we'll drop a color overlay on our spider by going down to your effects, and then with this color picker we can set it to what we just eyedroppered in the foreground color. Now some of the parts of the spider are like too perfectly straight, like there's not enough blur going on these legs. So I'm just gonna drop a Gaussian blur over the top of everything, going to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and yeah, we'll set it to 3 pixels just so it feels a little bit more faded. So now we've got our shape set. Let's drag in our players. I've already gone through the process of retouching these guys, but if you need help with that part, you can check out my video on advanced lighting, or you can look at my Jeff Babbitt MVP poster. I do the same process just with adding highlights and shadows and kind of cleaning up some of the colors. I think I want to shrink these guys down a little bit more, and something around there feels good to me. Now we can just give some foot shadows, and then we should be good to go with the cutouts. So I've been doing shadows a little bit different recently. If you go up to your brush and kind of squish the brush down, and then set your flow to something low, like 6%. Bracket keys to adjust the size of this brush, but basically we can just start painting in the parts we want darker or lighter. So this technique I feel like gives me more control over the darker and lighter parts of the shadow. So like obviously the part where the foot is touching the ground, we want that as dark as possible, and then kind of fading out as the foot comes off the ground. We'll do the same thing with the other feet as well. So I'm just kind of clicking and dragging around, and same with this toe, and then a little bit bigger and just clicking a little bit more sparingly for the softer shadows. And because we have this guy jumping up, we can also drop kind of a general soft shadow in that area to capture the jump. And maybe because that foot is a little bit closer to the ground, we can maybe put a point of emphasis like right around there. Now you can round out this poster design however you like. I would maybe add some text on the top and bottom. For now, we can just drop in, let's put the Spiders logo at the top, and then I also have this word mark logo that says Oakland Spiders written out, and we could put that at the bottom. But you might also play with like some paragraphs of text maybe. I mean, there's a good amount of white space here, but I feel like keeping things minimal is always a good option, especially for this design where we kind of just want like the interesting abstract background to be the feature. Let's go through our finishing effects now. So I'm gonna make a new folder. We'll call it finishing, and a new layer within that. I'm gonna Command A to select the whole thing. Then with my quick selection tool, right click in the middle, hit fill, 50% gray, hit OK. And then we'll go filter, convert for smart filters, and then filter noise, add noise. 7% should be good, and then we'll set this blend mode to hard light and the opacity to 50%. This is going to add some good grain over the whole thing. Definitely recommend grain whenever you have a white or a black background, just to give it some texture and some feel. And now we can play with the colors a little bit too. So let's play with this channel mixer. This is a way you can do like different types of black and white filters, and they'll just kind of highlight certain things. So maybe this red filter, but we bring the opacity way down to like 30%, maybe 20%. Just kind of wash out the players a little bit, desaturate them, makes them feel like they belong a little bit more in a grayscale background. And we can also drop a curves layer going down to our adjustments, curves, and let's click a point right on that corner and then lift up the blacks. So something like this. And we can maybe boost the highlights a bit too. Just want to give it kind of a dark gray feel as opposed to pure black. And we can also take this whole thing into camera raw filter. So I'm going to turn off the finishing effects. Let's make a new layer, and then Command Option Shift E is the shortcut to apply the image to its own layer. We'll go to convert for smart filters and then filter camera raw filter. So from here we can play with the colors and stuff more. Maybe we brighten everything. Oh yeah, kind of like reducing the highlights. We can get more detail in the shape. So something like this, and then we can always play with some texture and clarity, which I don't know if we need so much of it for this design. Maybe just some vignetting on the edges also makes sense. So that feels good. Pretty minimal edits with camera raw, and then we can reapply our finishing effects to get our final design. So that is our final Oakland Spiders poster, inspired by the cover art for 1,000 Suns. Again, I just really like the simplicity of this abstract shape on a white background, and really the Spiders logo felt like a perfect fit to apply it to a sports poster. Highly recommend just scrolling your phone, skipping through songs, and just paying attention to album artwork. Screenshot any covers you like, you can come to them later. Build up your own library of inspiration from music albums.